My name is Brittany Clark, and I've been working in product marketing for about 12 years, so have experience at a lot of different organizations, which we'll get into in a second. I am actually really excited to be here. I was talking to some old coworkers from Etsy a couple years ago, bemoaning the fact that there's no conference for product marketers. We have no place to talk about our work, maybe sidetracks at other places. And it's so exciting to be here and to have a group of product marketers and have this conversation. So thank you for organizing this, Josie, and the rest of the team. This is my experience. I want to talk about this just for 1 second to say I started out at GE, which is a very sales-driven organization working on hardware products. And then I moved into Etsy, which was a B2B and a B2C space. So I was marketing a lot to small businesses as well as consumers. Moved on to MailChimp, where I ran product marketing there for about 2 years. And that's very much in the B2B space, but with SMEs. So they do act very much like consumers in a lot of ways. And I know the question we just had about how do you understand a customer base of 1 million plus, that was a big question we had there as well. And then now I'm at Zapier. So hands, how many of y'all have heard of or used Zapier before? Awesome. And it is Zapier, not Zapier. Everyone always asks that question. So a little bit about Zapier. I have a colleague in the back with me, Joe. I just wanted to say hi. So he's here. We're both here, really excited to be at this talk. We're the only 2 product marketers at the organization, but this is Zapier. There's 270 of us, and we're spread all over the world. And it's a really unique company because it's fully remote. So it's one of the newer fully remote companies. Our product, we connect apps and build workflows for predominantly small businesses, but it's workflow automation. And we're all over the world in 28 different countries. We get together twice a year at annual retreats. And I bring this up because building and kind of scaling a product marketing team at a fully remote company is a very different challenge. As we all know, and as we've heard so far this morning, relationships are super important in the work that we do. And building relationships virtually is its own set of challenges. So we'll get into that a little bit as well. But in terms of this talk, I wanted to make it much more tactical. So I've given talks before about maybe a project that I launched or a new product that I took to market. And I wanted this to be about what I've seen over the 4 companies that I've worked at in terms of building and scaling product marketing. And I've done that both at an IC level. So these are tips and tricks that you can take whether you are the only product marketer at your organization, whether you work for someone who works for someone who works for someone who runs product marketing. This should apply to all of you, or whether you're actually scaling a team yourself. Before I get into kind of those eight steps that I'd like to talk about, I wanted to just highlight my philosophy on building products. And I think it's important to think about what your philosophy is, because this should thread through all the work that you do. So my perspective is that great products are what enable great brands. Without a great product, you don't have a great brand. Or if you have a great brand, it's going to fail at some point. Being committed to your truest friends is what drives word of mouth. And I think a lot of us in our businesses, word of mouth is how you at least get the initial traction. For Etsy, for MailChimp, for Zapier, it's been absolutely critical to getting them to the scale that they're at today. The third piece, which is really about the whole experience, the whole entire customer experience matters, whether you're talking about how you show up at an event, what your advertising looks like, all the way through to the website, to the product experience. And I think bringing that perspective to your product teams is really important. Fourth is that companies need crystallized differentiation points. So we heard about that earlier, but it's really important to know how you set yourselves apart in the market and to be able to speak to that. And then finally, retention is critical from day one. So when you talk about which customers do you care about, which customer base do you really look to, knowing which are your truest fans and thinking about how you can retain them and grow with them is super important. So product marketing, this is a good GIF, I think, I was looking around on Giphy for how to describe what product marketing work is. And this one was like, yeah, this is it. You're kind of defending yourself. You've got all these people asking you for things. There's launches coming out. You're trying to build a team. You're trying to figure out messaging. You're trying to run research projects, sometimes with an outside agency. And it's hard to make sense of all the chaos. And through it all, everyone's telling you the number one thing is to prioritize. And you're saying, but I have 400 priorities. It's really hard to do. So what I'm hoping is that this talk will make a little bit of sense in terms of how I've approached it and what I've seen work. And trust me, I've seen a lot of things that I've done have not worked. And we can talk about that if you have any questions about that. But these are the ways that I think you can kind of make some sense from all the chaos. I put it into really 4 buckets, the talk. So the first thing is understanding your customers. We've heard a lot about that today, so I'll skip over anything that is redundant, but that's the number one thing. You have to know your customers. The second is knowing your market. So understanding the competitive landscape, understanding the other players, understanding what tangential products your customers might be using that impact the way they think about you and your product. The third is building strong relationships. So Tamara touched on it a little bit about Shopify. This to me is where you really unlock the true power of product marketing, is if you have super strong internal relationships and you can go to your product manager, your PM, your designer, your engineer, and really collaborate with them. And so we'll talk through some tips on how to do that. And then finally, creating your vision. And I think this is important, whether, again, you're an IC or you are at a manager level, understanding where you want to take your product marketing work and being able to set that roadmap out for the rest of the company. So we'll start with understanding your customers. And in this space, there's kind of 3 topics I wanted to talk through. One is defining your target audience. Second is being able to articulate. It's okay. You want me to repeat it? Second is articulating the words to use. And then third is identifying the most impactful channels. And that's really around marketing. So when it comes to defining your target audience, I think there's really a spectrum of ways that you can do that, starting with qualitative research and going all the way through to quantitative work. So on the qualitative side, we've heard about customer interviews. You can bring customers together. There's a lot of forums, Capterra, G2 Crowd, iOS, Android stores for customer reviews. That's another really good way to do research. You don't have to pay anyone to help you do that. It's just desk research. I think internal interviews are also super important. So everyone's organization looks different. For the past 3 companies that I've been at, we don't have sales, or we haven't had sales teams. So I can't go to my sales team and say, what are the customers saying? So it's really about understanding from marketing, from product, from research. But who are the people in your company who have the closest relationships to the customers and really talking to them? And then finally, UX research. So this is a function that I think looks and feels a little bit different across different companies. It can be run by product marketing sometimes, but these are the people who are organizing the research studies, talking through kind of the iterative product development process, getting feedback on design and on UI. Being part of these research studies is so important. It's really easy, I think, with all the time, or with all, going back to that first slide with all the chaos, to kind of bow out of this type of work. But if you can get yourself embedded in the UX research, become a thought partner, become a contributor to the conversation that's happening there, I think that's another really good place that you not only develop an understanding of your target audience, but you're creating a dialogue with the rest of the team. And then on the quantitative side, I put some numbers up here because a lot of times it's hard to know how much these things can cost, but segmentation studies are gold. They're amazing, but they can cost $200,000 to $300,000, and that's probably on the lighter side depending on which agency you're using. So not every organization has that resource. I think if you can advocate for it, it does really help impact the focus of the marketing team, the focus of the sales team, but it's not always available. So if you don't have access to a few $100,000 to run a study, what else can you do from a quantitative perspective? You can analyze support volume. You can look through the path to purchase that was mentioned earlier, from marketing to sales, all the way through to customer usage, and kind of understand from a product perspective what customers are using, where they're dropping out, and try to build some quantitative work into your target audience. So I think at the end of the day, you're going to be most successful if you can showcase both qualitative and quantitative perspective in terms of who your target audience is. And then some of the potential outputs, you have customer segments. It doesn't always have to come from a segmentation study. I've worked at places where there is a really small amount at GE, a very small amount of customers. And so if you speak to 20 or 30 of your customers, you're going to start to get some consistency and try to build some segments around that. Marketing personas are definitely helpful, and I'll show you a resource that I built in a second for that. Definitely understanding the top concerns, the problems to solve, and being able to socialize those around your organization is also very important. And then another thing you can do is empathy workshops or some sort of gathering with your cross-functional team where you talk them through all of your learnings. So I wanted to show you this. This is at Etsy, we were launching a new craft supply marketplace called Etsy Studio that is now defunct, unfortunately. But it was a wonderful project. It was a super cohesive product team. And when I say product team, I mean research, design, product management, product marketing, engineering, the rest of the PR team. It was a very cohesive group working together. And I attribute that to this document, which was a packet of about 9 or 10 pages on DIY dreamers, which were our target audience. And we had this packet that we would put on a table in a room, and we hosted about 3 of these different empathy workshops. We brought everyone into the room, and we had kind of on the board almost like an IDEO or, an innovation session. We had questions around the room and sticky Post-its, and everyone we posed questions and the teams worked together to kind of think through the questions. And the whole output of this was, how is understanding this customer base going to change the way that you are going to do your specific job for this audience? So that was a packet. I worked on that with the designer who was on the team with me. We had a really close relationship, but it had both quantitative and qualitative information in it, and it just created this really easy to socialize understanding of the target audience. And this is what I feel like when you finally figure out who your target audience is, it's amazing. And this actually comes from MailChimp's Giphy library. If y'all haven't checked it out, check it out. They've got some really fun GIFs up there. They do a lot of, they spend a lot of time producing that. So the second step is articulating the words to use. And most of the time, if you're in an organization, the question around, we've got 400 products, how do we market them? I think a lot of this goes back to messaging. So often when you have a super distributed, MailChimp was in this space when I got there, and Zapier, we're kind of trying to work through it right now as well. We've got products, we don't really know how to talk about them in a way that makes sense to the customer. And that means that everything that flows from that is a little bit disjointed. So if you can stop and pause and understand and articulate the words you want to use when speaking to customers and prospects, you'll be in a much better place, and you'll find you get a lot more of your time back. So in terms of the inputs, there's different ways to do this. Another thing, if you have a budget, great, you can go and do a full-scale messaging and positioning study. That's probably $200,000 at the least. Maybe you could do it for a little bit less, but that's a big quantitative study. If you want to be scrappy and do it in-house, you can look at what marketing has performed best in terms of, you can look at email subject lines, you can look at paid advertising, you can look at which SEO articles are ranking highest, look at web traffic and where people are clicking on your website. And then also you can look in product, you can do some A/B testing there. If y'all have if anyone has a tool like Google Optimize or Optimizely, you can also run A/B tests inside the product or on the website, which is really helpful as well. So there's ways to do it in-house, there's ways to do it externally. The other thing I would add in terms of doing it on your own, this is more desk research. So you can go to all your competitor sites and look at how they're talking about their product and ask yourself, does this make more sense in the way that we're framing it? Or what can I learn from how they're positioning their product relative to mine? And I think through that, you'll not only understand what your messaging is, but also kind of what your differentiation points are. And so the output from this is, you've got your messaging architecture, your messaging guide, and that's what you can socialize across the whole organization, and everyone can rally around it, whether it's sales, marketing, PR, the product team. And this is something that I didn't think would be super valuable to a product team, but at MailChimp, we were aching for something that would help us reposition ourselves in the market, and everyone across the company, including engineers, anchored themselves to the messaging. You can also, of course, this is part of the messaging, but what's your value proposition? What are your proof points and claims? And this is another really important thing. So it involves working with legal. Typically, if you're a startup, you probably don't have anyone that you have to vet it through. But if you work at a larger organization, making sure that you can make the claims you want to, but being able to say things like, we are the number one blank tool for this target audience, or we are faster when we're doing X, Y, and Z in terms of our technology. That's really important. And then finally, you want to have a list of prioritized features and messages. So knowing which of your entire feature set is the most valuable to your customer or your target audience, and being able to help the company prioritize that. And that last point, the prioritized features and messages, that can change depending on who the audience is. So for segment 1, it looks one way. For segment 2, it looks another way. And I think you've got kind of your core prioritized list, and then there's different ways to cut it. So it can be by vertical, it can be by customer segment, it can be by geography. So if any of y'all work across different markets, you probably know that in Germany, for business customers, they're very concerned around security, and that's something that's very important to them, much more so than in the US. So you kind of tweak that based on the different ways that you need to cut it for your business. And this is just a little diagram I thought I'd leave up here for a second, but these are kind of the inputs to your messaging architecture. You've got your research, you've got your value proposition, your product strategy, which is really important. And then if you're big enough to have an identity system, which could be, your tone, your voice, how you show up in the world, this is probably coming from the brand team. At Zapier, we're still kind of building out that team, so we don't necessarily have this as an input as much as we did at, let's say, Etsy, where we had a really refined brand. But, these are kind of the 4 different layers that you can use to help drive the messaging architecture. Then the third piece of understanding your customers is identifying the most impactful channels. So I built out a rough outline of a marketing funnel here, and you've got all the way from awareness down to retention, but you want to look at data. So this is where numbers come into play, being a scientist. Where are your customers and prospects hanging out online? Which channels are getting the most traction? How do these channels map to the marketing funnel? A lot of businesses are super strong on SEO. I think one of a couple pieces of data that I would look at here, I look at your web traffic. Where is it coming from? What percentage is organic? What's the conversion rate there for the different channels? Which advertising is performing best in the market? How are you doing on social? Which social channels are performing super well? At MailChimp, we had really good traction on Instagram and Facebook with more brand messaging, but then when we went to talk about the product, it wasn't as successful, so it didn't get as much engagement. So just knowing things like that can help you kind of understand, as you build out your go-to-market strategy, which channels do you want to consider, and how do you partner with those channel managers. So moving on to the second bucket, which is knowing your market and architecting the competitive landscape. I think this is one of the areas that there's just a ton of different ways to go about doing this. And I think that the number one thing is look for assets that already exist at your company. So are there research reports? Do you have a market research team? Can you sit down with them and get them to send you everything that already exists? But you're going to want to layer on your own perspective. So meet with your sales, support, customer success, product teams, your marketing peers, understand which competitors are coming up in the market, who you should be paying attention to. Read as many customer reviews as you can get your hands on. So we've already done that a little bit to understand the target audience, but now we're doing it through a different lens, which is to understand, if you're looking at, if you're an e-commerce company and you're, Shopify, you're looking at what reviews are there for Shopify, but also for WooCommerce and for Magento and for the other players in the market, to understand kind of what are their strengths and weaknesses, and that allows you to build out more of an understanding of the market. They're digging into competitors' websites, which we already talked about for messaging as well. I think normally when I do the messaging research, I'll keep that same document and then apply it to the competitive landscape as well. But look at what releases they have, what press are they sending out, where are they going, where does it look like they're moving in the market. And then if you have a Crunchbase subscription, especially the one that lets you really dig into the companies, that I think is another really helpful resource to understand, once you've refined your competitive set, where they're going. And this work is not done, so you don't get to do it once every 2 years and then walk away from it, because competitors change, the market changes, competitors make new announcements. So I think it's important to refresh this every 3 to 6 months. It is a lot of work to do this. So if you don't have a market research team that you can rely on, we don't have that right now. It's just me and Joe. We're kind of trying to start with one competitor at a time to help build some understanding. Down the road, I think would like to do it much more frequently, but it's just not possible today. So what can you do that at least starts to socialize this information around the organization? And then, of course, knowing when a competitor makes a big move is really important as well. So I want to show you a couple of ways that I've articulated this. And feel free to take pictures, or you can reach out to me and I'll send you some slides. But this is one where you have kind of the list of your features on the left-hand side, and then you've got your competitors at the top. And then the way that this is kind of red, green, yellow, but it's white, light pink, or dark pink. So, which companies are really strong in these spaces, which companies kind of have weaknesses. That's one way to do it. Another way I've done it, which I really like, this actually someone on my team at MailChimp came up with this idea, but we've got competitors and then where their current state is and what they could potentially build for in the future. And this was really helpful because we were trying to build out a new product line, and we knew who our core competitors were, but we didn't necessarily know what they were capable of doing in this space. We were certainly the market leader at the moment, but would they be able to build a product that would compete with ours in the near future? So I think this is a really good framework as well. And then, of course, the tried and true, I pulled this from G2, but your little map. This is the one that I've always used to socialize across the entire organization. So if you're presenting to an entire engineering all hands, which I think is really great to do, get in front of your engineering team and show them the competitive landscape. This is the one that I think will actually sit in people's minds relative to the other two. But when you're talking to marketing or anyone who's out there trying to acquire customers, I think the other two can be a little bit more illuminative. So let's see, the third bucket is around building strong relationships. And this to me is the most important thing. I think you can do everything great. You can understand your customers and understand your market, but if you don't have the internal relationships you need, you're going to sit alone on your own island. So the first point here is embedding yourself in product development, and I'll talk through how I've done that in the past. And again, certainly haven't always done it well, but these are lessons I've learned. The second thing is bringing data back to your product team. So what types of information can you bring back that will illuminate something for them? And then third is building process to scale product marketing. And this reduces the confusion that I think an organization can have around what exactly product marketing is and can do. So the first thing is embedding yourself in product development. And this is really a perspective from Etsy, MailChimp, and Zapier, because there's no sales team, and it's really a highly cross-functional engineering, product, and design organizations. So the first partner I look to is your product manager. And I think if you can think about them as your partner in identifying the opportunity and going after the opportunity, that should be kind of your core partnership. And I think it's important, whether you're at a management level, to have that relationship with your peer at that level, or if you're on an individual product team, to make sure that the PM feels like you are their partner. And your focus really is to broaden their horizon, broaden their perspective, and to have dialogues with them around where they should go. So start to have that, should we do it this way? Should we do it that way? I think it's completely normal for you to have different perspectives, and that's actually very healthy. You don't necessarily want to think and look and feel the same exact way about all the opportunities as your PM, but you want to be able to have that dialogue so that you can talk about it. The second teammate is your designer. And I think here it's really around collaborating on customer empathy. So how do you, as someone who's thinking about the UI and the way the customers are actually going to interact with the product, that the designer's role, and then you, the person who's going to try to get them to that experience, how do y'all collaborate and make sure that you're on the same page on who the customer is? And this goes back to that conversation around the entire customer experience matters. Because if you think you're marketing to one person and they're building for another, you've got a disjointed product experience, and it's probably going to impact your adoption rate. So things you can focus on there or work on together, you can build out personas, you can focus on key problems to solve, and make sure that that's socialized within the rest of the team. Engineering, I think this was one where at GE, engineers literally sat in a different building. I hardly ever interacted with them unless if we were all in a meeting together. But at Etsy, it was kind of similar at Etsy until we started doing UX research, and we started inviting the engineers to the UX research, and they were super engaged. It really surprised me. They wanted to be there. They wanted to participate, and they had some really great ideas. So I think thinking about bringing them into the fold and making sure that they're part of the conversation, because most engineers don't just want to build something and ship it. They want to be part of the whole story. So thinking about, pulling in new ideas and perspectives from the engineers. What do they know that you don't know? Or what ideas do they have that you wouldn't think of? There's a lot of opportunity there. In terms of identifying new opportunities and just making them feel like valued teammates. And then finally, research, which is your avenue to better understanding customers. You can build out value propositions with them. I've worked with UX research teams where we've actually been able to get them to test messaging for us prior to launching a product. It isn't something that naturally occurs, especially if someone's coming from a product research background. But you can say, hey, can you give me 10 minutes in this hour-long interview or 5 minutes in your 30-minute-long interview to test these 5 messages? I want to see what resonates best so that we can build the best marketing for the customer. And typically, they're very open to that. What this creates is a shared vision for your go-to-market strategy. And that means you don't have to go out and fight, like, this is how we're taking it to market, this is why. Everyone's already aligned with you by the time that you've built that. The second aspect of building strong relationships is bringing data back to your product team. And if you think about it, they're not privy to all of the marketing KPIs, all the marketing strategy. And so often there's this kind of tension between product and marketing where product is saying, well, marketing's not doing much, and marketing saying, well, the product isn't right. And so if you can come to them and say, look, these are all the things that I'm tracking. This is the progress we're making. These are the channels that are working really well. This is how we're thinking about upper funnel thought leadership. This is how I want to show up at events this year and how I want to bring our product to customers through these different mechanisms, how we want to leverage partners. That always has been really powerful, and again opens up the door to shared collaboration, because this is information that they otherwise would have never had access to, or it would be on them to go and get it. And then finally, building process to scale product marketing. So this is something, there's a lot we could talk through here. This could be its own talk, but the thing that I found the most powerful is having some tiered launch system. Does anyone have that? Where you have, yeah. That's the most powerful thing I've found, because it allows you to have a shared language across all these organizations, all these different teams about what your product is and how you're going to bring it to market. So I'll just show you a few things. Again, I'll share these slides, but this is just kind of an example. So you've got your launch tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. I'll share these out. If y'all want them, you can email Josie and I'll share them. From highest priority all the way down to your basic iterative launches that you don't really talk to customers about. And then you can map these out by month and by tier. So this was super powerful at MailChimp. We're working on doing something like this at Zapier, where you've got the different products and what tiers they fall into, and then when they're coming out. And this allows you to say to the rest of the marketing team, if you've got content teams that you're working with or designers that you need access to, look, October's super busy. December's going to be pretty quiet because these are all, like, we don't even know whether these things are going to launch. So can we get the resources in October to take all these products to market? And then finally, you've got your deliverables. And this changes market to market. Joe's seen this slide. We haven't adjusted it yet for Zapier. This is kind of an old version that I have. But, across your different tiers, what are the things that you actually could activate? And then it's up to you as a product, as the PMM, to decide what's part of my go-to-market package. What do I actually include in this tier 1 launch or in this tier 4 launch? And then finally, creating your vision. So I think this is important. Again, if you're just starting out, your first time, speaking as someone who's managed new PMMs and looked at what kind of sets people apart, having someone who comes to you and says, this is what I want to do for my product line. These are the resources I think I need to get that. Whether it's a headcount or it's research studies, et cetera, showing that you have a vision for your product or for the whole PMM team, if that's the role that you're in, is definitely really powerful and helps you kind of get clout in the organization, as well as advocate for more headcount and grow the team so that you can have more impact. So what does this mean? I think number one, it's building a vision and a structure for your team. And even if you're only a single PMM, thinking about, like, what does that mean? What, you as a team of one, what is your vision for your team and your impact? Always align to business priorities. So understand where your company is going over the 1 to 3 year timeline, and make sure that you're aligning yourself to that, so that as you're talking to executives, you can say, this is how I'm contributing to this company-wide goal. Ensure you can demonstrate revenue impact. I know that's super important for our work. Aligning and signing up for revenue goals is great if you can do that. When I go to hire, I think always having a go-to-market case study or like a messaging case study is really important because you're able to kind of pick out who knows what they're doing or who actually is passionate about this from the people who might just like the name of your company or kind of want a job in marketing in general. And then finally, I think hiring interns is a really great way to not only build your pipeline of talent, but also if you have discrete projects and you don't have the headcount for the year, hiring an intern to do, let's say, a deep dive on a certain audience or to do a deep dive on a competitor or to run a research study. We've done this and had some real success. And I think oftentimes we've hired actually a couple of our interns at MailChimp we did. So I didn't have interns at Etsy, but I think product marketing is actually a great fit for an internship, especially if you can define the project. So not saying a generic PMM intern, but having someone with a discrete project who you can manage and kind of they have a deliverable they can show at the end of the day. I think it's a great space for internships. And I'll leave you with three thoughts. So think of each PMM as a mini GM or general manager. So you're managing your business. You're thinking about everything from offsite into the product experience, and you're helping your product manager drive towards their adoption and revenue goals. Focus on bringing net new opportunities to your teams, whether it's competitive intel, customer insights, marketing performance, or a new A/B test that you could run either on the site or in the product. And then this is a core of it, right? Know your customer and know your market. If you do these things and you have the relationships, you're going to be a successful PMM. And I think when it all comes together, it's like this vision, right? So hopefully you can get to the point where you feel like this, you're putting something out into the world, you know what it is, you feel crystallized. And then I'll end by saying thank you and stay in touch. Joe and I put our emails up here. We're going to be hiring probably in January. So if you're interested in learning more, feel free to reach out. But yeah, thanks for letting me talk. And I think we have probably time for a couple questions. Yeah?
Anyone questions? All right, let me get the mic to you.
Hi there. You mentioned brand awareness and product marketing interchangeably. What are your thoughts on whether they should be combined together or should be separate activities based on even the customer decision process?
Yeah, I think the way I've seen it work best is when brand and product are separate organizations or they've got separate goals, separate teams, but they're both kind of working collaboratively. So the brand team is working on building brand awareness and the product marketing team is working on building product awareness. So I would almost look at the brand team as kind of the high part of the funnel, the upper funnel that's driving awareness so that you can then start to talk about the product. Does that answer the question?
For smaller organizations, it's challenging.
For small, yeah. So for small organizations, it's definitely, I think, two things. Yes, it's hard if you don't have a full-scale brand team. Obviously, that's not realistic. So I think it goes back to that first point, which was a great product enables a great brand. I don't think you need a great brand in the very beginning. I think if you've got a great product, really strong user base that loves your product and you're building with them and you guys are moving in the same direction, I don't think you need a brand team. That's been Zapier's model, right? It's product first. We lead by building a great product for our target audience. And, we're only now starting to think, okay, we need to really establish our brand identity. But it doesn't have to happen right away. I don't think. That's my personal opinion. Any other questions? Okay, we're going to finish. Oh,
Great.
There's one right
one
back.
more.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
And then we do have a break.
Thanks. Hi, my name's Michelle. Oh, wow, that's loud. I found that sometimes product teams have started without product marketing, and then it's really hard to sort of gently claw back some of the activities that are more product marketing centric. How would you recommend doing that?
Yes, I'm very familiar with that. I think so. Understanding where they are. So if the product team is kind of led the charge and is coming to you and saying, here's the product we're launching, or even here's how we want to launch the product, taking a look at that, understanding what inputs they had and what inputs maybe are missing and bringing those to the table. I think that I always tell my team to think, bring net new information to the table. So that's where I would start. I would say if it feels like they're doing an amazing job and they've pulled everything together, then kudos, move forward, and then get yourself involved in the next time, because you don't need to create extra work. I assume you've got a full plate. But I think it's really about what's net new that you can bring to the table that hasn't already been done. Do they have a competitive landscape slide? Do they understand the target audience? And if those answers are no, then I think you can bring that to the table and kind of, as you sit down with them, say, this is a research I've done, and this is how I would like to kind of tweak what you've done. That I've never had anyone respond poorly to that. If you have new information, if you're just sitting down and saying, I want to be involved in this, you're likely to get a closed door. So yeah, awesome. Well, we're a couple minutes over. So
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Coffee, food, everything out in this general direction where you all had breakfast. And we'll be back at 10:30, or excuse me, 11.